Hello, welcome to our April Family Lunch and Learn, April 2021. I will now pass it over to Christine Kuvo, one of our HMS social workers.
We are so pleased to have Carissa Desiderio with us here today. Carissa is a supports coordinator and the owner of Cypress Supports, a supports coordination agency working with the IDS system in PA. She has extensive experience as a supports coordinator through the county agency with experience in transition planning and helping families navigate the waiver system. She founded Cypress Supports to help give clients a more personalized experience. She's with us today to discuss the supports and services available under the IDS system and waiver with some tips for families of all age ranges in connecting with and navigating the system. Thank you so much for coming and joining us today, Carissa, and I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you. Like she said, I started this company in 2018 after being in the field for a while. I was an adult advocate with what was the ARC of Delaware County for 6 years, and I served 300 people a year doing that job, ranging anywhere from benefits to waivers to working with different provider agencies and schools, you name it, I kind of did it. To the point where I probably should have claimed some of these people on my taxes because I was so involved in their lives. So, I realized through that the biggest part of that job was chasing around supports coordinators and trying to get them to do their job. So I said, I could probably do this for a living, I think. And sure enough, I could. So I did. And we recently brought on a new supports coordinator at the beginning of February. So we're growing and noticing that there is quite a need for quality supports coordination, especially for families that are exiting schools and really are trying to figure out what, 18 or actually 21 years older and beyond looks like. And that's a huge chunk of someone's life. So we're here to support them through the rest of that. So I have a presentation today that I put together that highlights a lot of the key factors of the service system I work in. I'm assuming everybody knows a little bit of something from either meetings or IEPs that you've been through and have talked about. Given the general population that HMS serves, I would assume this is always a conversation at IEP meetings just because of the level of need that your students generally require post-graduation. So with my presentation, please stop me if you have any questions. I'm happy to make this more interactive. I don't want to just overwhelm you with a lot of information because it is a lot. I try to touch on a lot of different topics that I get questions about. So please stop me, and I'm happy to leave time at the end as well to answer questions then. I think when I share the screen, I can't see people. So if you want to ask me a question, just speak up and interrupt me, please, because I don't know how to look to see who wants to ask a question. So please just stop me. Okay, so this talks about what happens after they graduate. And that's not to say that this conversation shouldn't be happening. Really around 14 is the transition age, right? So you want to start having that conversation, but certainly to get your kid on the radar of the county you live in. And us personally, we serve Delaware County and Chester County individuals, but any county you would live in, you need to get on the register of that county intellectual disability department. Get your kid registered if they're not already, because if your child is going to need a high level of support post-graduation, you want them to be on the radar and for the county to know they're coming and to have that funding available. If you're registering them last minute, even though the services I work with are needs-based, the person that's kind of on there the longest that has a similar level of need as your child, they're gonna win out, unless you really are a big pusher. Being a squeaky wheel in this world is actually very helpful too. So these are kind of the topics we're going to go over. I'm not going to read verbatim my presentation. I'm just going to kind of highlight some things on the screen, and you guys are more than welcome to share this with the families that are participating today and also other families. Happy to, you can share this to whoever. but we'll highlight some different things. So these are the different waivers that I generally work with. I don't work with the Bureau of Autism Waiver anymore, but I like to mention it because individuals that specifically just have autism, they can go to that option. But in the last probably almost 4 or 5 years now, the intellectual disability waiver opened up to individuals with autism. So if you're dually diagnosed or just have one or the other, you can now access what was just the intellectual disability waivers. And that's the PFDS waiver, which is the $33,000 one, community living, which is 70, and consolidated, which is completely needs-based. It has no cap. And I have individuals with that waiver that have 200,000 plus dollars a year of services. So it's generally reserved for people that need really extensive in-home supports, nursing, round-the-clock care, residential services, things like that. Otherwise, the community living waiver is pretty good for people that live in their home still and need a pretty good amount of services. And then the PFDS waiver is like kind of like a part-time level amount of care. These are the two eligibility requirements. For the intellectual disability waiver, it is generally it's 3 and up, but generally the county likes to see people around 8 because that's when you can really get a good score for adaptive abilities and intellectual disabilities. But they have to have that disability diagnosis before age 22. So anybody after that, it does become problematic. And then again, I kind of highlighted the different waivers. All of these waivers you can self-direct, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in detail in a different slide, but that means that you can hire your own staff. So if you have a friend that's a nurse, you have a friend that's a PT, you have a friend that's a speech therapist, or just a network of people that you know that can support your child and that you trust, you can do that through these waivers, and they get paid. And they actually get paid higher than if they were with a regular agency. So it highlights the different amounts of money that are gone over, and the kind of the level of service that it would provide. And these are all the services to date that each waiver provides. They're the same services, but you'll see the ones in red are the more residential services just because they're more expensive. So in the consolidated waiver, the 3 that are highlighted are just different options of living outside of the family home. So life sharing is where the individual would live or your child would live with another family, or if you would buy a home and then have someone live with them in their home, that would be life sharing. It's round the clock care. Residential habilitation is that standard group living where it's 2 or 3 people in a home or a 1-person home. And supported living is where the individual would live on their own with 24/7 care. But it's generally if the person is fairly independent and doesn't need kind of hands-on assistance with their daily living tasks like hygiene and things. And again, this covers the autism waiver. It lists out the services. It lists out the eligibility requirements. I generally find that the autism waiver can be a little more limiting. The providers are not as abundant, and the rates of pay for the services are not as high as the intellectual disability waiver, but I like to mention it because it is available. Everybody's familiar with an IEP. And in the IEP, it lists out the services, it lists out information about the individual, the types of supports that they require to be successful. That's in the school world, in the adult world, and I mean, in the school world too, I guess. But in my service system, they have what's called individual support plan, or ISP. And it contains a lot of the same information about the person, what they like, what they don't like, the level of support that they require, the level of supervision they require. And then once the person would get a waiver, all their services are attached to that. So you'll see the frequency of those services, how much they are for a budget. Everything is connected to the ISP. And that's what, as a supports coordinator, we oversee. We monitor the services, we coordinate that ISP, making sure it's up to date, and making sure that all the services are approved in that plan so the person can utilize them and staff can get paid. So it's a working document and it can always be changed. It doesn't have to be a formal process to change it. It could be just a call saying, hey, they had a doctor's appointment on this day, and we just update it. It's very person-centered, so we want to write it as your child and what interests them and what do they need. And then the team kind of plans around that, and the ISP plans around that. So it's always focused on your child, which is really nice. Does anybody have questions yet? No?
Carissa, my name's Vicky. I have just one quick question about the ISP.
Sure.
We've heard in the past that when you guys meet and do the ISP, that everything that you want in that year needs to get put in at the beginning of each year. Is that true?
No. So there is different times that you would meet to update the ISP. There is an annual meeting, just like an IEP, where you do have a chance to update it. It's whenever the plan was first created is when that annual meeting is. So it's not like, oh, you have a fall one or you have a spring one. It's whenever that plan was initially created, that's when you have an annual meeting. You also, if you have a waiver and you have services, you generally would meet towards the end of the fiscal year. So actually around this time, we're doing what's called fiscal year renewals. So the fiscal year is July 1 to June 30th. And you write not a whole new plan, but you flip everything over. So you have a fresh plan starting July 1st. So you get rid of all the old stuff, you take out old services, and you start everything fresh. But none of the frequency of the services, none of the current services would change. It's just kind of making sure everyone's on the same page. But it's not to say that 6 months later, if this person now needs job coaching or PT or something, it can't be added. It can definitely be added, and it's not a formal process. It's pretty quick and easy, but you don't have to make sure everything is in on July 1st and then you're stuck the rest of the year.
How about things like more critical revisions, like a home mod or a van mod? Do they have to happen one at a time, or can you put it all in the beginning of the year or the beginning of the waiver, and then how does that work?
So the home modifications and the vehicle modifications are a service that when you have the waiver are a lifetime, and a lifetime in that home or in that vehicle. The home is $20,000 per person. The vehicle is $10,000 per person, I believe. And you put it in when you need it. So it's not that you have right when you get the waiver, you have to submit for it then. It's whenever that person needs those modifications, and it can come immediately or it can come 10 years down the road. It's always available to them.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Hi, I'm Mary DeLuca. I just want to, be sure about one thing. You really only get one waiver, correct?
At a time, yes.
Yeah. Okay, because when you were bringing up the autistic waiver, I wasn't sure if some of our students would then be eligible for more than one. But even with the autistic waiver, it's only one waiver at a time, correct?
Correct. Yeah, the autism waiver is just one in itself anyway. But yeah, and then the ones I work with, there are 3 different waivers. But yes, you can only have one at a time, but that doesn't mean you can't upgrade them. So if you start with the PFDS and over the years you need more funding, we can say, okay, he needs the consolidated now, and we can upgrade it. But yeah, you can only have one waiver in one service system. You can't have 2 waivers at the same time. Any more questions before I move on a little bit?
And just one more question, the van and the home, that's one time in a lifetime through the waiver, you said?
Yes, and my understanding is if that family were to move and they needed a new ramp in their home, that they could, it kind of like refreshes, because it's not fair that they spent the $20,000 on the ramp at this house and now they need it at this house because they had to move. So that would be.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, so a lot of you obviously are, actually all of you are still in school. Your kids are still in school. So like I said, get them registered. That's always step one. It's never too early. It is a process, but it's a process worth going through because you're setting them up for later. Because later, when they are exiting school and you're worrying about waiver and what are they going to do when they fall off this cliff everyone talks about, you want to focus your energy on that, not registering them. So when you register them and you're waiting until waiver money comes through, there are some things that you can look for funding that would be outside of what the school or insurance would pay. So anything that would be therapeutic would have to go through insurance first. So, or if the school wasn't able to provide. So speech therapy, OT, PT, anything with wheelchairs, like different devices, communication devices and things like that, have to go through insurance first. If there is a denial that's issued, then we could submit to the county to ask them to pay for that. The county money is limited money, so it depends on what is available. And every fiscal year, July 1st, they're issued new money to be spent on these sort of things. In addition to that, there's respite care. So that could be someone coming to, babysit your kid. It can be someone you know. It doesn't have to be an agency. You can send your kid to camp outside of ESY. So these would be privately owned camps that are for people with disabilities. And there's different types and different destinations. If the parents are going away on vacation, you can bring someone in your home to be with your kid. And then, you can actually use this money too to take your kid out. If, like, I have one individual that's using it, he loves cross country. He's a runner. So the family is using it to have someone, when he's not in school, go run with him, because the family doesn't want to be running miles and miles that he can run. So they've hired someone that's younger that can kind of keep up with him and get him out in the community. So there's just different ways. And we talked about the modifications to the home and to the car. The car, generally, I've seen it just for the wheelchair lifts, and I don't know the technical terms, but when you put that into like a minivan or something, the home modifications, I've seen ADA compliant bathrooms. So if I have a client that's in a wheelchair, actually went to HMS, they are going to be able to wheel him into the shower. It's flat, level to the floor, ramps. I've heard also, if someone has severe behavioral needs, that they can modify the home to make it like indestructible. They've put down certain flooring I have one client that peels carpet up in different fibers and things. So it helps keep the home indestructible from him. So there's a lot of different things. Basically, if you can think it up, that makes sense for the individual and we can justify it, we can look to get it approved. It's not a guarantee, but I work really hard to make sure everything's in line to get things approved that the client needs.
So Carissa, you're saying that through just the not a waiver, that there can be home modifications through the county money, the yearly county money that renews every year?
Correct. Yeah, it depends. Again, it depends on what it is. So insurance would have to be consulted with first. So I had a client that needed a porch lift, and they ended up using a trust, but they would have had to go through their insurance first, get it denied, and then we could approach the county on that. So it's a little bit of a process, but it's always worth a shot asking. Okay, so I mentioned self-directed services, and that's when a family can bring in people that they know and they trust. It can be trained professionals, nurses, PT, OT, like I mentioned, or it can just be people they know. There are certain qualifications like 18 and over, generally, high school diploma, things like that. If you are using a more specialized individual, like your child has a lot of behavioral needs, so you might need enhanced staffing. They would need a 4-year degree in like human service field, social work, psychology, things like that. So this is something really to consider, and I like, because you get to customize a lot of things. It is a little more work because you are essentially starting a company in a way. You're not dealing with money. There are companies that would handle that. but you're having to train staff, you're having to sign off on paperwork, you're having to manage schedules of the staff. There is another company, they provide supports brokering that would help you do this. So they're essentially your HR department. They can help you hire staff, train staff, help with all this paperwork. They're really your right-hand man if you want to self-direct. And I strongly encourage families and sort of require them to get a broker if they're going to embark on this model, because as a supports coordinator, we can't really do it all. We can help a lot, but the broker, this is their bread and butter. So they're really there to help clients and the families manage this model if this is what they want to do. So there are two ways to do it. There is agency with choice, and there's vendor fiscal, which right now is a company called Palco. Agency with choice is through the Arc of Chester County, and Palco, they're actually located out of state, but both entities contract with the state of Pennsylvania. And depending on how much responsibility you want in managing all of this depends on which model you pick. And once if you would choose this model, there would be way more details that, I or another supports coordinator could go into to explain the difference between both. But I just wanted to make you aware of what is available. You don't have to just use the Devereaux and the Melmarks and Elwins of the world. There's this too.
This is Estelle Starpino. I have a question. When you said the provider, the provider model, meaning the parents, for lack of a better word, would be the ones firing the staff, but you're saying to get a broker, hire a broker to do that. Now, how is the broker paid?
They're a waiver service.
So you have to have a waiver in order the money will come out of that waiver to pay the broker for the services they would do for the self-directed services.
Correct. Yes. All
Okay.
Self-directed services would come out of the waiver as well. All of these services I mentioned are all waiver funded services.
Okay.
Including supports coordination. We are funded through straight Medicaid before you have the waiver, and then through the waiver via Medicaid once that's obtained too.
Okay, thanks.
What happened? I'm missing a chart. I don't know where the chart is, but it's on the actual presentation. So hopefully when they send it, it just breaks down the difference of using agency with choice, vendor fiscal, that Palco model, or a provider. And when I say provider, it's an already established company like Devereaux, Elwin, Melmark. There's a ton of them. There's a ton. And it depends on what you're looking for. But generally, when you're doing a provider, you're allowing them to hire the staff, they're paying the staff, they're training, they're doing everything. You're just receiving the services, and your child is receiving the services. Your hands are out of it a lot more. You're only involved to the point you want to be involved in. So helping scheduling, making sure that the staff are aware of what your kid needs and things like that, but you're out of all the admin stuff. Whereas if self-directing is your way to go, you're heavily involved in all the admin stuff. So that chart, which will be on there when they share it with you, breaks down the differences of those sort of things with all the different models. Employment, I don't know what everyone's feeling is on having their kid work post-graduation, but anybody that's interested in working or actually going to a day program in the adult world must go through the Office of Vocational Rehab first, or OVR. And it could be as simple as OVR meeting with your kid and saying, okay, yeah, they're not going to be independent working, even part-time. So we're signing a non-eligibility letter and you're done. You just kind of need that letter to get to the next step of using waiver funding to go to a day program or receive job coaching through the waiver, which will be, that job coach will be with them all the time to whenever they need a job coach. I mean, it could be for years. Whereas OVR only brings in a job coach for the first 90 days of employment. And that's an estimate. They've extended it a little bit in certain circumstances, but that individual must be independent once that 90 days or so hits at a part-time level of employment. So Go ahead. Does someone have a question? Oh, sorry. So if that is not your kid and you think my kid is going to need support all the time, then we're just going to look for that non-eligibility letter. But this is definitely a step that would have to happen before they graduate. And again, it's not having. I have a picture here of the application. Again, it will be there when they share it. Project Search, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail with this, but Project Search is a program through OVR that is for people, again, that are pretty independent. They can move around. They have mobility abilities, even if it's through a wheelchair, if they're able to control the wheelchair on their own, are pretty independent with learning tasks and are able to work part-time independently with minimal job coaching once they're done this program. It teaches them soft skills. It gives them internship opportunities at different places of employment, 3 actually, and it's a year-long program. You do have to be able to make it to Lankenau Hospital or Bryn Mawr Rehab Hospital. So either you transport them or Uber or however they get there, but there is no transportation available. So that's kind of one barrier I've found. So it's a nice program if you think your kid would make sense pursuing this program, or if they'd be interested in doing it. It is a successful program as well. So this just kind of outlines more of the program. Social Security is always a big topic of conversation, especially for students that are 18 and over. You have to be 18 in 1 month to apply for SSI. Although I've heard rumblings it's earlier than that. I've had a couple of clients come through that they're like 16 and have it, which I don't know how they did that. But generally it's 18 in 1 month. And it's based off of the needs of your child. So your income, your assets are not included in the eligibility criteria. And if the individual if your kid's still living in your home, which I would imagine they would be, you do want to inform Social Security that they will be contributing to household expenses. That way they will get the total amount of benefit under SSI. Excuse me. You also want to tell them you want to be your kid's rep payee, so you can manage their finances and do any reporting that needs to be done, so that your child doesn't have to worry about it. If your kid does end up working, you do have to report their income monthly. You have to send in pay stubs, and I attached this SSI wage calculator because based off of their income from work, their SSI would go down. Generally, they're still making more money between earned income from work and SSI, so it works out. But that's a nice tool to have to make sure you're not going to bump your kid off of SSI benefits by having them work too much. There's also ways of your child, if you yourself are on SSDI or your spouse is, they can also claim adult child disability benefits once they're 18. And then if your kid does end up working, they could even be eligible for their own Social Security disability benefits. But once you would go apply for SSI, you are applying for SSI. A lot of families get confused about SSDI because it says disability in the word or in the title of that benefit. SSI is what you want. If for some reason your child does get denied, you do want to make an appeal. You don't want to reapply. There are attorneys that handle only these appeals, and they work off contingency, so they only get paid if they win your case, and you go to court and everything. If you don't win, they don't get paid. So it's a nice way to go because the company I use, actually, it's Silver and Silver. They're really great. They do this very well, and they win often. So just know that. Always appeal, never reapply.
I had a question on that too. So the child becomes eligible at 18. When should you apply for that? Because I know everything seems to take time. So should it be a couple months before, 6 months ahead, or can you not apply until they turn 18?
18 in 1 month is when you can apply.
So they have to be 18 in 1 month. And then is it typically, do they approve it fairly quickly or does it take a long time?
I've seen both. I've seen months and months and months, and I've seen 1 month. Actually, the woman I had that applied and got an answer back in 1 month, I said, that's kind of scary. That's really fast. So, I mean, right now with COVID, it seems like they're getting through pretty quickly because everybody's at home working. So they're not, not worrying about paperwork as much. It's all virtual. So if your kid's there, I mean, you might get an answer pretty quickly.
Okay, but you can't actually apply any earlier to kind of make up for that wait time. You have to wait till they're 18 plus 1 month.
Correct. Yeah.
And then the other question I had, it just kind of confuses me. Like currently my child has the medical assistance, which I guess is the Medicaid. Now, does that stop at 18 or 21 that it goes over to Medicare? Or is it always going to be?
It's always going to be Medicaid.
Okay.
I think eventually, if you're on SSI long enough, I think you eventually get Medicare, and then that becomes your primary, and Medicaid is your secondary. Or, if your kid's still on your private insurance and you have 3 insurances to work through. But yeah, Medicaid stays. You won't age out of that.
Oh, okay. I thought it once you hit a certain age, it automatically moved over to Medicare, but it does not.
No, it does not. There might be, and don't quote me on this, but there might be some sort of renewal process because you're moving from like a child to an adult, something like that. So there might be something that comes in the mail, but I'm not confident in that. But yeah, Medicaid is Medicaid, and you're actually going to need the Medicaid in order to get the waiver.
Okay.
Okay. Ticket to Work, again, is another funding source for working in the community. And then, yeah, always report your earnings. So these are good tools to use. If your kid ends up working and you have to report to Social Security, you can do it online, which I highly suggest because then you get a receipt. And then if you have any questions before your child would get the waiver, you can always contact the Work Incentives Planning and Assistance Program. They do help with coordinating benefits when someone is working, but they also can answer questions about Medicare, Medicaid, things like that. They're really good and they're free. And this highlights the job of supports coordinator. Our job is to locate, coordinate, and monitor. So we're looking for services, we're reaching out to different providers, we're letting you know what is available for your child. And the way we kind of go about it is we ask you, what is your plan? What do you want to see for your child in the next 5, 10, 15, the rest of their life? And then we say, okay, this is your goal, and this is what we can surround that goal with. We don't go the other way around where we say, okay, these are your services you can pick from, figure it out, and we'll meet you at the end of it. We really try to work with you on customizing and being creative. So it's a very a la carte approach to services. And our job is to let you know what is available. So we'll never hide services from you or make it difficult to access those services. We try to do as a lot of the legwork as possible. So we'll pre-fill paperwork or, meet with a lot of providers to get information and then present it to you. So we try to make this process as easy as possible. That's not to say that there aren't barriers to accessing different services. Like I said, if we have to go through insurance, that's a barrier. Getting the funding itself is problematic because, like in the school world, it's all entitlement based. In the waiver world, it's all eligibility based. So whoever is eligible for it, first off, that's always the first line. And it's based off of need, financial standing, and diagnosis. And then after that, it's who has the greatest need. And then after that, it's who fights the hardest. So if we find that families are coming to the end of their school year and the waiver is just not coming through that we need for that individual, we advise families get in touch with your legislators, start making some phone calls to decision makers at the county, and really advocate for your kid. I have found that parents that have kids in private schools, such as HMS, they're the fighters, and you got to keep that mentality. Once you have the waiver, the fighting can cease, and it's not as intense. But getting that waiver, sometimes you do need to ramp it up a little bit. And I just let you know that just so you're prepared if that fight has to come. But we try to do that fight for you, and set up a waiver packet to present to the county. So it's clean and easy and they know right up front what we're asking for.
I have one other kind of stupid question. Once you're given a waiver, can you lose the waiver? Ever lose the waiver?
Yes, if you do not keep up with the annual physical form, there are renewals to continue the Medicaid, or if you do not use services in a 45-day period for a reason outside of travel. Like I have a client right now who's been in Pakistan for like 2 months. So, you know, there are ways to lose it, but generally if you keep up with everything you have to, which is not a lot, it's yours for life.
Carissa, would a change in medical status also exempt losing services? So say you don't have services for 45 days because your child has a significant medical need and they're recovering. How would that impact services?
It depends. So if an individual is in the hospital or in rehab following a procedure or something like that, there are some exceptions, and especially right now with COVID, there's a lot of exceptions. But if it depends, you know, if someone's home and recovering and they're receiving insurance funded supports because that's kind of all they can maybe handle at the time, then, you know, there are ways around that. So if you were using a provider first and having an agency come in with their staff, maybe we take that out and make you as the parent, the staff person, and use self-directed or something. So you're kind of still using the waiver, but you become the staff. Things like that can be done to prevent underutilization of the waiver. But if all else fails, it's our job as the coordinator to let the county know the situation and just continue to update them as things change.
Great, thank you.
Carissa, thank you so much for this. It's extremely informative. One question that we have that comes up at HMS a lot, because so many of our families have faced it, is that because of needing one-to-one nurses at home, many of our families are funneled into community health choices, CHC. And while we have found that it's great when it comes to covering nursing services, DME, medical needs, et cetera, they're really not contracted with any of the day programs or a lot of the habilitation programs that our students benefit from. What would your guidance to us as school social workers, as well as to families, be if they're getting a lot of pressure from their county that they have to go through CHC, or else they're risking their one-to-one nursing, or there'll be a lapse in coverage until the waiver comes through?
Yeah, we went through this with a client of mine that exited HMS last year, and Laura knows that battle. It ended up that the family had to meet with the county deputy administrator who oversees the county disability services and basically plead her son's case. And she pointed out things that I actually didn't even know of. She said, if your kid goes to CHC waiver, because, and I always get a little lost in the details of all this, but CHC is it's managed by insurance. So if you go over there, you're obtaining insurance. So you have to change all your doctors to make sure they're covered by that insurance. So Keystone, things like that. Whereas in the waivers I work with, you have Medicaid. So you can maintain your doctors, or, you know, find adult providers just under Medicaid. You're not tied to just one insurance provider. So that was a big piece of it that the county actually didn't know either. And that, I think, kind of won over my client has significant medical needs. So that won the county over and said, well, we don't want him to have to change all of his doctors and lose these specialists he's had for years and years. Also, they had a letter of medical necessity to indicate that he needed a certain level of nursing every week. He has 60 hours of nursing a week through an LPN or RN. So having that is really helpful. And also, too, the difference between CHC and the consolidated waiver basically is the residential piece. You know, you have to really look at what is the primary diagnosis of your child. Is it all the medical diagnoses, or is it the intellectual disability? And what is your goal for their life? The CHC waivers really focus on the medical piece of somebody versus the intellectual disability and that social piece of them. So if your goal is to have them integrated in the community and not focus so heavily on their medical stuff as like their day-to-day things, then you want to go with the intellectual disability waivers. And that's not to say medical won't be a huge component of it. It just won't be their whole day. It will be, their whole day will be focused on what do they want to do? What's the purpose of their life? And to have a quality life. And I found that to be the biggest difference between consolidated waiver and the CHC waiver.
Great, thank you.
Chris, I had a question about, you had mentioned for parents to become the representative payee on Social Security. And then you also mentioned later that they can then become one of the caretakers of their child as well. It's my understanding that if you're a representative payee, you cannot be a paid caretaker through the waiver. This is through the CHC waiver. I don't know if your waiver has those same laws or rules. And it was, so that's the rule for CHC. Is it the same rule for the ID waiver?
No, it's not. A parent can be a paid caregiver if they're a rep payee.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Any other I can't talk today. I'm sorry. I'm surrounded by a toddler all day, so I don't get to practice talking much. So does anybody else have any questions? I tend to overwhelm during this presentation because there's so much. I'm always happy to talk with people individually because certainly everybody's situation is unique. And, there might be more specific questions I can answer.
I don't have a question. I just wanted to say that, you said that it's overwhelming because it's a lot of information. It is, but this is the clearest I've ever heard it presented in my whole life. And I'm also a social worker. So it was really, really, really helpful. So thank you.
Thank you. My husband is in a completely different field than I am. And I'm like, if he can understand this, then anybody else can understand this. So I try to think I'm talking to him. And he's so funny. Now he knows all my jargon. So it's funny when he's talking to me now, but I'm glad to know that it was understandable to you because it's a lot. And it's taken me a long time to understand it. And then they change it on you, right? So you have to understand it all over again. Anybody else? Anybody have any fears if their kid's graduating soon that I can try to help you with? Okay. Well, I have my information at the end of the presentation. If you want to contact me, you're more than welcome to. It doesn't mean you have to switch to us like this. I'm not here to kind of promote our organization. It's just informational. My passion is helping families. So if you just have questions and you want to stay with where you are, I'm happy to help you. Even give you pointers on how to work with your current sports coordinator. But definitely if you're not registered already, get registered. Whichever county you're in, just go do that. Make that a priority for next week or something, because that is super important.
Krista, thank you so much for